All right, we are live. Assalamualaikum, everyone. Bismillah, bismillah.
Bismillah, bismillah. So
Wait for a couple people to get in.
I think now is the time where everyone can share the link to the live. Share the link to the
Alaikum
live.
salam. Assalamualaikum. Go ahead and drop your salams as you guys come in, inshallah. Let us know you're here. Assalamualaikum, Brother Vincent. Assalamualaikum, Sister Jamila. Assalamualaikum, everyone. Remember, this is a great time for you guys to share this to your pages. Inshallah, we're going to have a great conversation. We want everyone to be in and enjoy with us, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Naomi. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Gloria. Wa alaikum salam, Sakina. So we're just giving Dr. Cook a moment. She's getting her technology together. But inshallah, Medina, if you want to go ahead and get started and introduce our first guests.
Sure. Well, first off, before I do the introduction of the guests, I must say, I know that Sabria Mills said this last week, but please continue to make du'as for her as she heals from her surgery, which is why she is not here today, but I know she's watching. I see her. She just gave salams to the family, and I'm assuming that is the Dope Muslim podcast, Dope Muslim Woman podcast family. So Sabria, we are here. Hopefully we will do this podcast justice as you do every week, inshallah. So welcome everyone. Alrighty, so our first guest is here and ready. This is Sister Fauzia Muhammad. And I just say sister all the time. I'm sorry. I thought I was at work for a minute. Okay, wait. Let me backtrack. I'm working in Islamic school. Backtrack. Okay. Anyway, this is Fauzia Muhammad. She is originally from Harlem. She's a mother of 3. Now, this is probably, I won't say the most important thing, but this is what we're going to be talking about this evening. She is a domestic violence survivor who has grown and learned so much about herself throughout that process. She has learned to communicate and build relationships and bonds with people. Now, I have to give you kudos for that before we continue with your bio, because that is hard to do when you've been violated, but that's a whole nother story. In any event, in that process, she has become an entrepreneur. She's worked through her craft and her talents that God has given her to create a jewelry business and a health and wellness business. And with that business, what she does is she helps others. And helping others, she supports them on their journey to win. So thank you very much, Sister Fauzia, for being here. All right, it looks like Dr. Cook is here. We are good with the optics. Okay. So the next person I'm going to
get onto the computer.
I think you're good. We see you and we hear you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Cook as she's working out the technology stuff. So Dr. Cook is a Philadelphia native born in West Philadelphia. Dr. Cook attended school at Overbrook High School and had her first child at 15 years old. Sadly, a year later, she became a single parent as the father of her child died in a tragic car accident. However, she was determined not to let that tragedy define her and deter her from her goals. So she continued with support, continued to get through school, and she went on and got her bachelor's degree, her master's degree, and her doctorate degree. Her bachelor's in health sciences from Lincoln University, master's in occupational therapy from Philadelphia University, and doctorate in occupational therapy from Temple University. And she also has a teaching certificate in higher learning. She's currently an occupational therapist who specializes in environmental modifications and aging in place for older adults. Dr. Cook, you and I are going to talk a little bit later. I'll tell you why later. Anyway, Dr. Cook worked as an assistant professor in Delaware's first occupational therapy program, in which she helped develop and get accredited. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. She's worked with mental health and psychosocial settings, as well as with youth. Now, recently, she has created her own program called Trials to Triumph, which focuses on giving back to the underprivileged youth in the Philadelphia community. So, as I said, the list goes on and on and on. She is a great asset. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Cook. We're good? Okay. All right. So, as we dabble in this really, really tough topic, heal thyself from domestic and sexual abuse, we're going to go ahead and start asking the questions and have a discussion, basically. If you have any questions yourself, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. Veronique? Oh, wait, no, stop. I did not introduce Veronique. Wow. Okay, so most of you know her. As you know me, I am Medina. We have been on the Dope Muslim Woman podcast a few times to co-host with Sabria. Um, if you have not seen any of those episodes, go back and watch them. They were awesome. But in addition to that, you may have seen Veronique on her movie debut yesterday. She created a movie to reveal her special gift that Allah has given her. So if you haven't seen that and you are friends with her, please take a look at that. I was like, whoa, Veronique is doing a movie. I didn't know. But in any event, congratulations, Mabruk. I wish you and your family, your addition to the family, all the blessings in the world. So
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
No more me. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So, of course, our topic is heal thyself from this domestic and sexual abuse. Thank you guys. Thank you all in the comments. So, as we did dive into this, I want you guys to just picture a woman embarrassed and ashamed of the bruises that may be on her body, the mental torture she's endured from her spouse, any sexual acts he's, coerced her into doing. Many women struggle to talk about what's happening to them. And many women believe that they deserve to be treated this way and that their actions cause their spouse's rage, right? So, Fozia, the first question I want to ask you is, can you define domestic violence and the different forms of abuse? And then after you go to that question, we'll talk about what was your experience with domestic violence.
Okay, so domestic violence is there are a number of things that you can describe it as, but basically how I'm going to describe it as aggression, anger, sadness, and you really don't understand when you're actually in it what's happening. You really are not grasping. It's not you, it's the other person. They have been through some things that basically are the cause of what's happening. So domestic violence is there's verbal abuse, there's mental abuse, there's physical abuse, there's, like you said, sexual abuse, there's those are basically the ones that I know about, and they all have to do with the not the survivor, the person who's causing the hurt and everything on the survivor, basically. But what I've been through, where I've been through verbal abuse and mental abuse. And basically I'm from a born raised Muslim family. I come from a big family. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, but being able to have that experience and being able to really wake up it just helped me become a better me. What you just said a few minutes ago about being embarrassed and having these different type of experiences and just thinking that it's you and you're going crazy and you're just trying to figure this thing out. You don't want to tell anybody, you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want anybody to know. And it's just really torturing. It's really torturing. And then especially if you have children, and just like it doesn't make it any easier. It's like so much pressure. You have to make sure this is done, make sure that's done, keep the children together, keep yourself together. So it's a lot on your plate that you have to deal with when you are going through domestic violence. Whether you're going through physical, whether you're going through verbal, whether you're going through sexual. They all have everything to do with some type of lack in the person who's causing the abuse. That's where it's coming from.
Okay. Can I want to add something to that question, if that's okay. So would you say that you changed in, like your mannerisms, your behavior, your what you accepted changed in that relationship, or after you got out of that relationship? Basically, were you the person when you went into the relationship, were you the same person in the relationship that you were when you went into the relationship? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that in a moment.
Was that, can you repeat that again? Was I
Sure,
the
sure,
same
sure.
person
So
who
I
I
guess I'll
am
explain it.
today?
So no, I guess I'll explain it. So I know last week on the Dope Muslim Women podcast, we were talking a lot about. I say we, I wasn't on it, but they were talking a lot about like childhood behaviors that go into your adult life. So I'm wondering, when you went into the relationship with this abusive spouse, when you went into this relationship, were you um, how would you have described yourself when you went into the relationship? Like, were you shy? Were you outgoing? But then you got into this relationship, and then you stopped talking to people. Like, how? What was the change, or was there no change? Are we having technical difficulties? You're muted.
Sorry, that's like the famous line for
I know
teachers.
you're muted.
If she's frozen, maybe we can come back
Okay.
to that one. She's having
Okay.
some difficulties.
No problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Dr. Cook, you ready? Welcome, welcome.
You're muted. Yeah.
Can you got hi? Oh girl, the technical difficulties tonight. Can you
This
guys
is
hear
life.
me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we hear you.
Okay.
this is life. It's okay. We just move on. We roll with the punches. Okay. This question is for both of you. With domestic violence, the abuse comes from the hands of a person we love and trust. Additionally, many women silently suffer from sexual coercion and abuse in their marriages. Let's talk about the impact that this has on you and on your life and your relationships and all of that. Um, Dr. Cook, you wanna tell me, or you wanna start with that? How does this impact you and impact women in general?
Well, that's domestic violence can impact women um, in many ways. So you're talking about emotional, psychological, physical. It typically tears people's self-esteem down, leave them feeling unwanted, insecure, not safe, unsure of themselves. And if you add children into the mix, because oftentimes women who are married to people who abuse them, usually have a family, usually have children as well, then that's a larger impact on the children. So you're talking about seeing mental health illnesses such as depression,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
post-traumatic stress disorder is a large one. So it impacts how individuals function on a daily basis. Some women become depressed. They don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to survive. They lose the typical skills of completing ADL tasks, which is, basic care of themselves,
Right.
whether it, be going to work or going to school or being a mother. So it impacts women, and also I'm going to include children in a large grand scheme of things.
So can we add on to that? So, yes, domestic violence has various, types. It's various types. What about sexual coercion specifically?
And that gets tricky. I'm really not too in tune with that area, but
Okay.
oftentimes I hear that the sexual coercion is hard to, maybe, I don't want to say justify, or what's the word that I'm looking for? bring charges against the spouse because they're married. And
Right.
sometimes men feel like that's a right to take it from women. But if your wife says, no, not at this moment, that's what she means. And being sexually forced to do acts with your husband also leaves trauma, because that could be a form of rape, abuse. It's just, oh man, it's traumatic. It's a very traumatic experience. Because if your husband is abusing you physically and sexually, then who do you trust that this is supposed to be your protector and your provider?
Yep. Yep. I understand. Thank you for that. I think it's other than who you trust, it's a respect thing.
Yeah.
Like, how can you think it? And I'm gonna be real, because that's what we do on the Dope Muslim Woman podcast. Why do I keep tripping up on the name? Anyway, but I'm gonna be real. How can you even enjoy it? How can you
Right.
even have that connection with your husband or with your spouse if you're being forced to do it?
You know what oftentimes typically happen is, have you ever heard of dissociation?
Mm-hmm.
So in traumatic experiences, the person they leave their body mentally,
Yep.
emotionally. So they're there physically, but emotionally and psychologically, they're not there. So yeah, you're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to be comfortable to you. You like black out, excuse me. And in that moment, you really don't realize what's going on. And then afterwards, you may have some recollection of what occurred during that experience. And someone asked, how can you identify possible PTSD, domestic violence? Flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, things to that nature is
Triggers that make you think of it. Go ahead.
all signs of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
So let me bring this in, because of course, we're Muslims, this Adult Muslim Woman podcast. So how common is this abuse occurring within our Muslim homes?
I did another panel last year about domestic violence, and it was a Islamic podcast. It's not a panel as well. It's happening more than we know, in large numbers. And what I've learned from working with the imam is that a lot of people will go to the masjid to seek help, and they're not equipped to deal with that because they're spiritual leaders. They're not mental health professionals. So they don't know what to do and what advice to give. And that's when a lot of times women hear people say, oh, pray about it, make dua, but that's not going to help the situation, because you're being oppressed, you're being abused, and it's really impacting a life. So from what I gather, and the research shows, it happens a lot, and a lot of times it's not addressed and it's swept under the rug, which causes more issues later on down the line. Especially, I have to stress, especially if you have children growing up in that environment, because they're learning behaviors. And then you talk about learned behaviors. Learned behaviors are things that children were exposed to, whether it be physical or sexual. As a mental health professional, I know for a fact that, people that abuse people were abused, whether it be sexual or physical. So if you see a man putting his hands on a woman, 9 times out of 10, he learned that behavior from somewhere. Children who touch other children, or people who molest or rape people, typically were victims of that type of abuse themselves. And they didn't get the help that they needed to, move forward in life and progress in a healthy manner.
Right.
I'm actually happy that you brought that up. I mean, we're going to move on to the next question, but I'm happy that you brought that up, Veronique, because I know I've heard, I guess I'll mention this. I've been married 16 years, and I've heard some of my friends say, that you have to comply when your husband, wants you to. You have to comply.
Yeah.
What? And I get that I wouldn't even say that you should. I get that if you're in a marriage, you both want to be happy, so on and so forth, and that might make you happy. I get it. But anytime you coerce anyone to do anything, anytime you tell someone you have to do this, or I'm not going to be happy with you, or I'm going to divorce you, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, is it really worth it? I mean, I'm just curious.
That's another form of abuse. That's a whole nother form of abuse. You're talking about narcissistic personality disorder. You're talking about manipulation. So when you're married to somebody else, somebody like that, that's a different animal that you need to address on top of sexual and physical abuse. You're dealing with somebody who has mental health issues and who's trying to manipulate you to think that their behaviors are okay when they're not.
Correct. Would you say, and like I said, we're going to move on to another question, but this is not the question, the original question. I deviate. Would you say that abusers or perpetrators, whatever term you want to use, would you say that they have mental health issues?
I feel like they have some type of trauma.
Yes.
Let's say trauma. I mean, and in the grand scheme of things, if you have some type of trauma, you have some type of mental health issues. And, in our community, unfortunately, it's a large negative stigma on trauma and mental health. And everybody says, oh, I'm not crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. But, when I'm working with my patients, I tell them to look at a mental illness as a physical illness. So if you are diabetic, you're going to take your medicine, right? To live. Right. If you have high blood pressure and you don't want to have a stroke or a heart attack, you're going to take your medicine. So when dealing with mental illness, it's very important to address that, because not a lot of people know that your cognitive and your mental goes hand in hand with your physical. So if your mental is off, physically, you're not performing at the highest level that you could be, because it's a trickle down effect. The brain is, what runs everything. So say if you have depression and that part of your brain is telling you, oh, don't get out the bed, I don't feel good, I don't want to shower, that's impacting your body physically, but it's stemming from the brain, the cognitive part. So it's important to, address both. And that's what I tell people. So yeah, I think as a professional that people who are perpetrators and abusers definitely have underlying mental health conditions that they're not addressing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. I'm going to bring up a comment because it goes right with this sister, that she's dealing with someone who suffers with bipolar, schizophrenic, and doesn't want to take their medicine, so it's causing many issues. So that's exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah, that can be hard.
That's very hard. It's very hard.
I would say, I mean, the sister didn't necessarily ask for advice, so I'm not giving it. But,
right.
But it sounds like when you're dealing with someone with bipolar, schizophrenic disorders, those disorders, you want to first educate yourself on what that means for them. When you do that, then you can start to see how you can make that work, how you can fit into that, how you can support that person. I've actually been dealing with 2 people with bipolar disorder, and like in my profession, but you really have to understand what it means for them.
Right. You have to know the signs and symptoms as well.
Yep.
If I have a family member that has bipolar disorder, and very close family member, and it took like a toll on us. And that's when I started really getting into the mental health aspect of occupational therapy, because typically I was gung-ho on like ortho, knee replacement, hip replacements. But when you have a close loved one who has that, it's very important to advocate for them and yourself and to know what's going on. So, signs and symptoms. Now, if I get that phone call and I hear some of the symptoms, I'm like, oh, they're in a manic state. This is what you need to do. Or, okay, maybe they're in a depressive state. This is what you need to try. But it's very, very important to know the signs and symptoms of what your loved one is suffering from, so you can help yourself and you can help them, because as caregivers, we're going to get burnt out if we don't know. excuse me, and if we don't take care of ourselves as well. You have to know how to help your loved one.
Yep.
I'm
Agreed.
gonna
Thank
bring
you
a
so much.
question from the audience too. The same Sister Sakina said, do you think that someone with a mental health condition can make you sick with their sickness?
It could wear you out. Like I said, caregiver burnout, but it's not contagious. It could definitely take a toll on you, especially if you don't know how to deal with this person. You don't know the signs and symptoms. It's all new to you. So it's really more so of a burnout. So you have to educate yourself. You have to be empathetic to them. You have to try to help them. You have to actually be realistic with yourself. And if this is a partner, and say, is this something that I really want to deal with? Because you have that right to say yay or nay. So it's all about being realistic with yourself, trying to understand and, knowing your limits. But no, typically, you can't get ill from their illness. You may suffer different things, because of dealing with it, maybe like depression or anxiety of always being on the edge. But if somebody has bipolar disorder, you're not going to get that from, being with them.
Yes.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. I'm
Yes.
reading.
I want to. Agreed, Sister Zakia. Agreed. Okay. Fauzi, are you with us?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay,
I had some technical
awesome.
difficulties. Sorry.
No, you're okay. Technology happens, and we say Bismillah and keep it moving, right? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next question. I don't know if you got some of that question. Is there something you wanted to add on to that, or you want me to move on?
No, you can move on. It's fine.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so how does a sexual abuse survivor connect in an intimate relationship with a man? How does this impact a woman's ability to connect sexually? It's a lot of questions in one. Let's start with the first one. I'll repeat it. How does a sexual abuse survivor connect in an intimate relationship with a man? What do y'all think?
I personally, that's not something that I have experienced. So I really can't really give you all and the viewers any take on how. I definitely say therapy. Because it's something that traumatic that has occurred, and it's going to take you to be able to go through a healing process in order to be able to really gradually grow back to connecting, with a partner. So, I mean, that's just, what I can give you and share with you all. But I really haven't, personally experienced it. So that's just, my response.
Well, thank you for your insight anyways.
For me, I can answer that question because I suffer from childhood sexual abuse. And so you have to get a certain type of therapy. And I'll say this because I've bounced around from therapists. I'm a therapist. I believe in therapy because, you can't do everything on your own. So I was seeing a therapist for 3 years, and I want to say maybe the first 2 years I avoided the topic and she didn't touch on it. But then I realized I needed something more, and that was a trauma-based therapist, because they're going to do different assessments and tests and make you really dive deep and become aware of what happened. And then you just learn different things about yourself. So when you suffer from sexual abuse, whether it's as a child, whether it's rape as a teenager or woman, whatever the case may be, that's going to impact the relationship that you do have with men or women if you're a man and it happened to you, because it has to be a level of trust there, a trust factor. And that is compromised when, you're abused. There's a level of dissociation, especially if during that moment you're trying to have an intimate experience with your spouse and you have something called a flashback or intrusive thought, which is a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. So, like the sister said, I'm sorry, say your name again for me.
Fauzi.
Yeah, is it Fazia? Like she said, it's all about healing and reconnecting with yourself, trusting yourself so that you can move forward and be comfortable in the experience with your spouse. If you don't get the help that you need after, experience something so traumatic like that, it's going to go into relationship. And that brings a bunch of different things that we're seeing now, which is women being promiscuous, um, um, a masculine energy from females, more so masculine energy instead of, feminine energy. Dating the opposite sex because you lost that trust factor, and dating the same sex because you lost that trust factor, and the opposite sex because you were abused. So it just goes on, and it takes a lot of therapy and work to get past an experience like that.
Mm-hmm. So, like I told y'all from the beginning, this question is a loaded question with multiple parts. So we'll move on to the next part. How does this impact a woman's ability to connect sexually? So, how does the sexual abuse or how does a sexual abuse survivor connect in an intimate relationship? We just talked about that. How does this impact a woman's ability to connect sexually?
It impacts your ability to connect sexually because do you really know yourself in that moment now? How do you feel about yourself? Like one of the topics that's big with therapy for someone who's suffers sexual abuse is shame. So if you're ashamed of your body and yourself and what actually happened to you, being able to connect is not really going to happen. Because you have to break down those walls and those barriers and heal from that layer to be able to connect on that type of level.
Anyone else want to add on to that?
I do just want to piggyback off of what Dr. Cook said. Like she said, you have to definitely get a special type of therapy, and you also have to definitely build trust within yourself, not just with a partner, but you're gonna have to relearn that way again, just like a little child who's learning how to walk. It's something that you have to relearn again, and it's something that you have to go through and grow through a process with as well. So that's just my response with that question. But it's really a process. It's not something that is going to be something that is going to be so quick and fast, but it's going to be something that you have to make a self-evaluation of, because a part of the foundation for you to be able to move forward is self-love, healing yourself, going through those processes. And like she said, you have to go through a special therapist in order to be able to address those certain type of needs that you need, because a regular therapist won't address them. They'll just keep going over your head, and you'll just keep wasting time versus really being specific in that direction, is to really, excuse me, help you move forward with, going through that experience that you had.
I think it is also key to note that when you have been sexually abused, you're going to, or you may feel, mentally broken, obviously, and physically broken, right? So having those intimate relationships may be difficult and even painful, for lack of a better word, because of the psychosomatic responses that Dr. Cook was talking about earlier, the mental working with the physical. Does that make sense? So right. I just want to make sure that everyone out there, like I felt like I had to point that out, that there's going to be more than just, I'm hurt and I'm sad and this shouldn't have been done to me. It can affect you physically as well, and affect your relationship with your spouse. To be honest with you, your sexual relationship with your spouse. So that moves us to the next part of this question. What should our men understand about marrying a sexual abuse survivor?
Well, I think it's important to know, because a lot of people, women, men, and children, keep that a secret. Let's just get that clear. The shame runs so deep that not everybody is telling and talking about it. Right. But if you do know, just educating them educating themselves about it. Maybe so SOAR in war, Women Against Abuse. I think I'm saying it right. They have a program where as though, the victim can get, I'm not going to say victim, I don't like that word. The survivor can get therapy, but they also allow the partners and family members to get it too, so they understand and have an idea of, signs and symptoms, and things that's bothering them, and just trying to heal and get past it together. So your partner is empathetic, your partner knows your triggers, and how to deal with those triggers.
And
I think
I also
therapy. I think therapy together is very needed and very helpful.
agreed. So when we say, what should our men understand? I would say our men should understand that it's, if the survivor is having a trigger, it's not about you.
That's
Mhm.
right.
It's not about you, and it's not that they are against you, right? So
Hmm.
one thing I've heard someone say, when you're overcoming the remnants of sexual abuse, I've heard them say that you have to just remember that the spouse or the cousin or whoever, that is not the person that abused you, unless it
Right.
is, right? But if it's not,
Right.
it's not, and you have to remember that. And so I think men should definitely know in these situations that it's not about them, and it's not about the woman or the survivor hating you and never giving you what you want. They just have to get there
I agree.
because they have to understand that you are not that person. So
I agree.
that's just my little tidbit on that.
I think
Um,
they should learn their partner's boundaries too.
Mhm.
Like, what are your boundaries? Is it okay to do this? Is it okay to do that? What do you want me to avoid? Um, what are your triggers?
mhm, mhm,
What happens when you're having those triggers? How can I help you?
mhm, mhm. And patience, right? Like
Patience. Oh, definitely
the man
patience,
have to,
because
I mean, I
it's
can't
a
even say the man, but the spouse has to
it's
be
a roller
patient.
coaster. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, I want to read this one out loud. I thought that because I can talk about my experiences without getting emotional, that I was over it. I'm finding out that there is definitely more work for me to do. Inshallah, sister, you will get the, I don't want to say healing because we say that all the time, but you'll get the relief that you feel you need. Am I
Both the
supposed to read
survivor.
that one out loud?
No, I got it. Both the survivor and the partner need to get counseling. Very few men understand that an abused woman needs a lot of care and healing.
It's
A
not
lot
just,
of patience.
let me just stress this. It's not just women that get abused.
Oh yeah,
Correct.
absolutely.
It's
Correct.
not. Men get abused. Boys get abused.
Yes.
And they hold that secret. But there are signs and symptoms of abuse in men just like there is in women.
Hmm.
It is. And some of that can be the need to be with multiple people. They just can't stop. They
Hmm.
have the urge to be with this one and that one and this one and that one. And they just act out in certain ways. That's a big stress factor that you got to watch your sons as well.
Right.
You have to.
Thank you
So
for pointing that out.
for those who have lived through the trauma of an abusive or violent partner, they may expect an instant sense of relief once they've escaped, right? A calming peace after they shut that door and move on to the next chapter. But instead, what they can experience is sometimes completely different. So instead of tranquility, they may be feeling anxious. Instead of joy, they may feel guilt, or they may not feel anything at all, right? So what are some of the stages of healing that an abuse victim goes through? And Fozia, if we could start with you.
Could you repeat that? It was, I couldn't really hear you. What the question was?
Sure. What are some of the stages of healing that an abuse victim goes through?
Um, so the stages of healing. So I want to share my personal stages of healing. So I did a lot of meditating. I did a lot of journaling. I did go to a therapist as well. And I just really focused on moving forward, you know, working on loving myself more, working on seeing myself in a better space, you know, being that I am a mom and I do have children, I have boys. I definitely saw and wanted them to be in a better environment. You know, that definitely would help me be better as well. So the things that I took upon myself to be able to do was like just, you know, spend a lot of time with myself, journal it out, meditate, cry, do whatever that I needed to do and I felt to do in order to be able to help me get through those tough times that I really went through. And I also want to add that, you know, these things are going to need to be done, you know, whether you feel like it, whether you are depressed. I mean, these are the things that you have to get done in order to be able to really mentally and physically move forward, you know. It's difficult, but it's the things that you have to do in order to be able to move forward, you know, past what it is that you went through.
Talia, did you want to add something?
Just piggybacking journaling. I've learned that journaling really helps you to like release how you're feeling and just getting your thoughts out of your mind, because when you don't and you keep it bottled in, then you become anxious and you have that anxiety. Um, for sexual abuse, they stress yoga. And yoga is because you have to reconnect with your body, because a lot of times you are not inside your body. You disassociate. And it can be, even if the abuse was years ago, any little thought or trigger or even in an intimate act, you can leave your body. You can start to disassociate. So, a lot of times they stress on yoga. So yoga, meditating, becoming grounded, journaling. I feel like journaling has helped tremendously. And
Yes.
definitely meditating, because from my experience, I suffered from not only PTSD, but anxiety. But I think anxiety was the worst for me. So meditating kind of calms those thoughts. It kind of like brings you in the present, in the now, which is very important because you're not in that experience anymore. You are in a new day, a new time, and you have to be present in order to move forward from the past. So definitely meditation, yoga, journaling. Um, and somebody said that they felt like because they, talked about it, they were over it. It takes so much more work. You have to do the work. You have to do the work. A lot of times we're unaware of how it impacted us, whether it was physical or sexual abuse. We just don't know. We're not aware because we're not living in the present. We may be in denial. So, getting help, yeah, working out as well, getting help, seeking professional help, being open to, different assessments and feedbacks, and making you more aware so you can actually work on whatever it is that you're dealing with and move forward.
Melina?
Sure. How do we establish boundaries? We talked about this earlier. So, how do we establish boundaries prior to marriage? Um, this is an interesting question because we were just talking about how, people keep it quiet and keep it silent and all of that. So, how do you tell your potential spouse that this is what you're going through, this is what you've gone through, but set those boundaries as well? What do you all think?
Well, first, let's be clear. Victims, survivors of abuse typically don't have boundaries. And that's a fact. And it's unfortunate because our boundaries have been taken from us. So the first thing that we need to do before even getting in a relationship with somebody else is learning ourselves, learning our wants, our needs, our likes, our dislikes, our strengths, our weaknesses, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Those boundaries within yourself have to be established before going into a relationship. Because if you don't, and a lot of times women and men, because now that I'm in this field, I feel like I see men do it a lot too. Instead of working on themselves and really healing themselves, they go from relationship to relationship, and they get the same problem, different face. And my suggestion would be to, do the self work first. Um, Figure out what your boundaries are, establish them. So then when you're at a sit down, or even if you're not Muslim and you're dating somebody, you're able to clearly state what your boundaries are. And if they are violated, then you either, come to the table, renegotiate if it's negotiable, or, you go your own way. Yeah.
Okay. So there's some more parts to that. Fauzia, did you want to add to that or?
Yes, I do want to piggyback off of what Dr. Cook was saying, like she said, with the boundaries and in the process of going through the traumatic situation that you're going through, whatever type of abuse that you're going through, you lose that, So you definitely have to relearn yourself. You have to regain that trust, and you have to establish those boundaries, and before you move on to another relationship, like she said, because it will just be a repeat. I have spoken to a few people, and I've shared my story in different pieces and ways, in so many different ways, and the way that, like she said, the boundaries. I'm just like, in my head, I'm just like, there has to be something established in order for you to be able to have a healthy relationship moving forward,
Right.
and you have to do the self-work first. If you're not going to do the self-work first, you're going to have a repeat relationship, marriage, and that's what's on the table. You have to be the one to see the value in doing that self-work, because it's going to take work for you to be able to build that trust, build that self-love for yourself, in order to be able to say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. So that self work, it has to be done in order for the boundaries to really be established in a way for the relationship or the marriage to be healthy.
I think self-love, you touched on self-love. And I think that is the biggest thing. And I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of people are not taught what self-love is, what self-love looks like, because of a history of toxic generational families and, trauma and things being, swept under the rug and not being dealt with. So typically a lot of people don't have boundaries because, one, it was taken from them if they were abused, or two, they weren't shown what boundaries are. And I feel like once you start doing the work and you start like really loving yourself, you're not going to let somebody mistreat you or abuse you or use you. So someone asked, how can you get these boundaries back if you're still with the person? And the biggest thing is reiterating those boundaries and sticking to it. So if your spouse is repeatedly doing things that goes against what you ask, then you have to ask yourself a serious question. And this is for ladies and men. Do you love yourself more, or do you love him more? Or do you love her more, or do you love yourself more?
And then you
And
also
you
want to make.
really have to be realistic with that answer. Okay, I love myself more than I love you, so I'm not going to let you abuse me, whether physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, anything. Because then what happens is you leave them after a while, and then you may get a good guy that come along that has better intentions, but because of the last situation, it's going to get ruined.
I think adding on to that, we have to make a conscious effort when we're doing our self-work and our self-love and all of that, a conscious effort to decide how we want to show up, right?
Right.
So
Right.
do we want to be happy, Yes, make a conscious effort to work towards that happiness,
That's
whatever
right.
that means and whatever that takes, because it's subjective, right? So it works for
Mhm.
everyone in their own way. So that, that's just my little tidbit. In addition to, setting the boundaries, we kind of touched on this, but not really. What about those red flags that we might see in our potential spouse? What are they? When do we say, I'm done? Don't
Don't
listen.
ignore them. A
You
lot of
know?
times we ignore them, right?
Right,
Let's be
right.
honest.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we see it and we ignore it because women, when you meet somebody and you're in the liking stage, we create fantasies in our head, right? Let's be
Yeah.
realistic. Oh, I like him. We're going to get married. We're going to have a baby. We're going to do this and this and that.
Have it all
We
planned
might
out.
not even be thinking about that, but
Right.
we're creating that scenario in our head. And meanwhile, this is what I tell people, and this is what I tell my children. Sometimes just sit back and be quiet, and a person will tell you all you need to know, right? Just listen to them talk, and they're going to tell on themselves. It's up to you, it's up to me, and it's up to everybody else to really pay attention and say, whoa, is this something that I want to deal with? You know?
I
Because
never thought of that.
Hmm.
I never thought of that. Thank you, Dr. Cook. Like,
yes,
just be quiet and listen.
listen,
Okay.
I do a lot, a lot of people typically they think that like, oh, she's so quiet, she's so reserved. I'm big on energy and just paying
Mhm.
attention. In that moment, it's not that I don't want to be bothered, but I'm really reading you to pick up on your energy and your vibe and to see what type of person you are. And I'm listening. I'm listening to how you interact. I'm listening to how you talk to people. I'm paying attention to how you treat people. I'm listening to the things that you say, things that occurred in your past. I'm paying attention. So
Wow.
So
yeah.
to answer that question, I hope you all took notes. Basically, be quiet and listen and pay attention.
Yeah.
Because there are definitely red flags, or there may be red flags, and you will be able to see them. You don't have to try to hunt for them; they will come out.
Yes.
Did I sum that up?
Yes. But to get to the real thing, you said what are some signs? Some of the signs could be it starts okay for domestic violence. I've never experienced it, but I've researched it, I've taught it, I talked about it. Some of the signs of a domestic abuser, it doesn't start off as physical always first. You have verbal, and then you have emotional.
Yep.
And verbal can be that person trying to tear your self-esteem down. You're not pretty enough. You're fat. You're not doing this right. You're not doing that right. You need to change this. I don't want you hanging with this person. They're constantly picking at your self-esteem. Excuse me, until you have no more. Emotional could be neglecting you. You guys are laying in the bed together. He's not paying you no attention, or she's not paying you any attention. Yelling, screaming, tone. You got to pay attention to tone. And then things can be physical. I don't even like when I hear people joking and say, if you leave me, I'll kill you or something like that. That's a red flag to me. I hear the younger generation saying things like that. And I'm like, that's not funny.
It's not funny at all. Right.
It's not
Not a
cute.
joke.
So you got to pay attention to things like that. They think they're your property. You're their property. They possess you. They get you away from your family, your friends, isolation. Pay attention to financial abuse as well.
Yeah,
That's also important.
that's true. Fauzia, you want to jump in here?
Yes. So I was gonna say a lot of the things that she said, but like she said, it doesn't start out with hitting. It does start out with being really aggressive, talking down to you, telling you that you're crazy, you're overthinking things. You should do this, and you should dress this way, and you shouldn't do this because you're embarrassing me. And gradually, it will get to the point of physical. Gradually over time, it will get to a physical experience. Because that's how abusers do. They come on very strong in the way where they think that they make you think. They manipulate you. They make you think one way,
Master
and
manipulator.
what you're experiencing is something totally different.
So, so
Somebody
that's
just
a
said grooming as well.
I
Yeah.
was just I was just gonna say grooming, and then someone else said gaslighting. So
Gaslighting. Mhm.
all of those are red flags
Hmm.
And
before
this
you get in
brother,
too deep.
thank
But
Okay.
you,
you
brother,
have
for
to know what
chiming in
those
too.
So
are.
don't
It's
ignore them.
important
So
that you
don't
know what
ignore them. Don't
gaslighting
be
is and
naive and
grooming
ignore them.
is. It's important. You have to know those terms. You have to know those terms so you're aware. If they're trying to make you, a person should love you for who you are. If you get with somebody and they're constantly trying to change you and they want you to be this way, and that's grooming,
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Well, thank you so much, Brother Red Sea. As men, it's not our job to control, only protect. Thank you for that. And we're gonna continue to move on. But there is definitely a brother or a sister out there for everyone, right? So
yeah,
those folks who have gone through such traumas, there is someone that is going to be patient. I promise you. There is
yeah.
someone that is going to go through the night terrors with you and
Hmm.
just hold you and say, "I'm here." There is someone to do that. So I just wanted to say that too. All right, V, if you want to go ahead and move on.
Yes, ma'am. So betrayal by someone we love creates a type of psychological scar that goes beyond being victimized. I mean, it is a result in great confusion around loyalty, love, family, and can single-handedly destroy our self-esteem. How do you begin to pick up the pieces and move on from your abuse? Hosea, you want to start?
Can you repeat that? Can you
How do you
repeat that
begin to pick
question?
up, sorry, how do you begin to pick up the pieces and move on from your abuse?
So I say start with that specific therapy to be able to just get a picture as to where you should start, the things that you should start to work on implementing on a daily basis, just to be able to have some type of idea going from one situation to stepping out and just not really knowing which way to go, but to be able to have that advice, that guided advice, to be able to say, hey, you know what, I'm not in the situation anymore. I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. And these are the things that I'm taking initiative in my life to be able to do, because I definitely need to get healthy on this kind of level and love myself and just really be able to function in the way to be able to live a fulfilled life. So basically, I say, start off with, whatever kind of trauma you went through, you work on getting and starting that therapy, and journaling, meditation, include these things inside of your daily day, because they will really help along with the therapy, and it's just gonna be a journey. It's not gonna be something that's gonna happen. It's not gonna be a turnaround overnight. But you understand that because it didn't take you overnight to go through all of those things that you went through. So I say how you start to pick up the pieces is you start that specific therapy as to whatever it is that you may have experienced.
Dr. Cook.
um, I agree with everything that she just stated. I also think that it's important to separate yourself from toxic people. And sometimes toxic people look like family and friends. And if they're not
That's right.
supporting your healing journey, they could become a trigger. So not only do you need to seek therapy, but you have to be aware of people who are healthy and unhealthy. And I had this book. I'm trying to think of the name of this book. Healing the Child Within. It's called Healing the Child Within, by a prominent doctor who works with people who were sexually abused or had traumatic experiences. And in there is a chart of people who are healthy and unhealthy for you. You know, maybe they take the side of the abuser, they make excuses, or they're an enabler, or they might guilt shame the survivor. You want to start picking out people who's healthy for you and who's not healthy for you, and get in therapy. But when you go to therapy, you have to actually do the work. you have to actually do the work, and you have to actually be consistent. Stay consistent with therapy, prayer, meditation, working out, whatever it is that's going to help you become whole and happy again, then that's what you need to do. But you definitely need a strong support system. And sometimes that can be other survivors. Sometimes it could be family. Sometimes it could be friends. But sometimes it might be people that you least expect. And you just, you just have to be aware. You have to be aware of who you are personally, what you're dealing with, and just try to move forward and just stay strong.
Well, the sister said it took me 2 years to reach a point where I was ready to start therapy. I focused on giving my kids stability and trying to find some normalcy and balance.
Very important, because
Thank you for sharing that.
your kids are watching. So that's a blessing that even though it took you 2 years, it didn't take you 15. And whatever it was that you're dealing with, you can heal yourself, and you can, get some healing from your children, and talk and have open dialogue, and don't keep any secrets, and just be realistic with them. Tell us normal was not normal, and set up healthy boundaries, and just move forward. That's all we can do.
Now, as we move closer to closing out our session this evening, are there any more tidbits or comments related to how to adequately reconnect with a new spouse, a new lover, a new spouse, for those of us a new lover, a new spouse after domestic or sexual abuse? Any other comments we want to add?
No, I mean, I just want to reiterate about the specific therapy. And when I had my own personal experience, I was in denial. I told my mom, I don't need therapy, I'm fine. She could literally just look at me and say what I needed, and I was like, no, I don't need that, I'm good. I don't need that. I was serious about it. I was like, what are you talking about? I don't need that, I'm good. And then when I actually I sat with myself and I said, you know what, maybe let me just try. And when I did, it just opened up a whole totally different can of worms, and it gave me more insight, and it gave me more strength as well. I was opposed. I was like, no, I don't need that. I'm good. I got an iron fist. I'm good.
Denial, right?
Yeah, listen, I was, but once I actually just did it anyway, it just really helped me get stronger and go through the healing process, because it's necessary. A lot of people are so ashamed to go to therapy because they think that it's whatever. They have whatever kind of thoughts about it. It's just like whatever, but it really helps you become better. It really helps you heal. You can't personally yourself, you don't have those skills that the therapist does in order to be able to help you. You've been through a traumatic situation where you need that help in order to be able to heal. So don't be so naive, or oh, no, I don't need that, to shy yourself away from doing something that's really going to help you heal, and for you to be able to really move forward, and be able to find a spouse, God willing, in the future, in order to be able to have a healthy marriage and relationship. So I say the specific therapy as to whatever it is that you have been through. So I say therapy.
Yeah.
Sister Zakia said trauma-focused therapy, as well as Dr. Cook said it in our little private chat, trauma-informed care. And just as a counselor, I will add that many therapists have different modalities or different models that they use, right? If you find a therapist that focuses on trauma, but they do CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, that's good too. If they do solution focused therapy, that's good too. But you want to make sure whoever it is that you touch base with, you want to make sure they can guide you through that specific trauma. If that makes sense. If they have no experience with trauma, I'm sorry, that's not the one for you. Okay.
Yeah, I have to
So
agree with you.
that's what I would say. What were you gonna say, Dr. Cook?
Um, and you know what? You're very on point with the techniques and modalities that they use, and some of them use a combination. Um,
Yep.
if you're dealing with domestic violence or any type of trauma, you don't want to just go see a regular therapist. I've done it. I've sat on her couch for 3 years. I paid my $50 copays weekly, and I vented. I felt like it was a vent session, but it did not get me where I needed to be. Um, it didn't hit the core of what was going on, you know? So you really have to do research on your therapist, figure out how many years they've been in trauma care, what they specialize in, if it's a man or a woman, because you have that right. You know, if you don't want a man, because that might be a trigger, you know, that's your right. I really stress therapy because it helps. You know, a lot of times people say just pray. That's not going to help mental health conditions because mental health conditions come from changes in the brain. And that's just neuroscience. When you suffer abuse, it impacts your limbic system. Your limbic system carries memory. So it is so much deeper than just telling somebody to go pray because the body keeps the score. Always remember that quote, the body keeps the score. And it's a book on it, which means any traumatic experience, we might not be in that moment, but if something happens, your body is going to remember it. And it's going to be an instant trigger. So you need to heal that limbic system and that vagus nerve, and just deal with it. You have to be aware. You have to be aware. If you're not aware of what's going on, um, you really have no self-reflection skills. And then if you don't have self-reflection skills, you don't grow as a person. And then it's going to all the cycle is going to continuously repeat itself. You're not going to heal from that trauma. So it's just I really, really stress that. And I also self-stress love. Like you have to love yourself. You have to love yourself. Like, oh God. I know a lot of us was taught that, but we have to teach it to ourselves, whatever it looks like, and we have to teach it to our youth. You know, whether it's affirmations, telling yourself an affirmation every day, writing it, manifesting positivity into your life. You have to change that negative cycle and that negative thought process and just move forward. Definitely.
And just to add on to that, I truly believe in affirmations and self love, and I have this thing in my group of friends. I'm not gonna say it because my husband is in the other room, but I have this thing about loving myself. Like it's all about me. Some people may take that as selfish, but it's all about me because if I don't love myself, I can't love anyone else. So I
That's
said
right.
that in a very nice way. But in terms of affirmations, in my office, I have a mirror. Now I work with high schoolers, middle schoolers, and elementary. I have a mirror that says, I am beautiful. And so my students will come in, and of course now I'm at home, but of course they'll come in if they're sad or whatever, and I'll say, look at the mirror, say it out loud. So what I started adding is, I am loved, I am blessed, I am this, I am that. And so like various things. And so they have to read them. They have to read them because if you don't speak it into existence, it's not going to work.
That's right.
And I mean, I am a firm believer in praying it into existence as well. But if you don't ask Allah for guidance, then that's going to be a problem. If you don't do the work to tie your camel, then that's going to be a problem.
That's
So,
right.
So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Anything else, V, before we close out?
No, alhamdulillah, we're having some great conversation. I just think it's very important that we talk about this topic because it's one of those, Muslim issues that people may think does not exist, but it definitely does, and it's an issue. So it's great to hear stories and just get these tips and all these gems for those sisters who may be dealing with this, and for the sisters who are dealing with this, may Allah grant you ease and rectify your situation, inshallah. But that's it for me. If you guys wanted to add.
Just know that, you know, you may think you are the only one with that story, but your story and sharing your story can potentially save somebody else and help somebody else. So don't ever be ashamed. Don't ever be scared to reach out. Don't ever be scared to tell somebody or ask questions. You never know who else is going through it. It's nothing to be ashamed of because you're not responsible for somebody else's actions. And I had to learn that, like, I'm not responsible for this person's actions. I'm responsible for mine. So their action has nothing to do with me. So don't ever be ashamed or embarrassed or scared to ask for help or tell somebody, because that person might save your life or be a blessing to you or maybe help you get out that situation.
Hosea, you have anything else? Any last words? That didn't sound right. Any last comments? I had to lighten the mood. Sorry. No. Okay. Hosea? Can't hear you.
Sorry, we can't hear you. Alhamdulillah, the sister saying that this was right on time. I needed this. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. May we have more conversations around this.
Yeah, we do need to have, I was thinking about that earlier. We need a lot more conversations about this and making it normal, because in our community, not just the Muslim community, but in the African American or the Black community, it's a topic of shame, and no one wants to address it. And then the person that does address it typically gets treated like, you know, the black sheep or the wrong one for, you know, pulling the dirt from under the rug instead of sweeping it under the rug. And we just need to talk about it more and normalize it so people know that it's a support system and they feel comfortable.
So thank you for that, Dr. Cook. Thank you, Fauzia, for giving your insight and your experiences. I hope, and I think we hope, I want to speak for Veronique as well. We hope that someone got something out of this.
Yeah.
That is the reason why the Dope Muslim Woman podcast is here, to deal with those topics that some people don't want to touch, because hopefully it touches someone's heart and it gets to someone. So thank you all for coming and giving us some tidbits of knowledge and your experiences. I don't have anything else. Audience, thank you. I say audience, I guess that's what we call you. But audience, thank you for showing up every week. I see names on here that I see every week. Thank you for that. Those of you who just came today, welcome. We'll be back next week, inshallah. So God willing. So on that note, I want everyone to have a wonderful evening. And we'll see you next week. Sabria will be posting more stuff about what's coming up next week. Also, I know Sadia, you are watching. Can you go ahead and Sadia put the link for the merch, for the Dope Muslim Women podcast merch. You'll see it in the chats. teespring.com, such and such and such and such is there. Okay. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.